Hey podcaster, meet Acast. We're the top independent podcast network for creators in the know. We empower you to develop your podcast idea, find your audience, and grow listener relationships wherever those listeners are. You'll also find a whole range of ways to make money, from membership plans for paying fans to our fully curated and creative advertising experience. Visit acast.com/network to find out more. Acast, for the stories.
Let's talk money at 3:15, and Mary Holmes in. Hello.
Hello, Jesse.
Nice to have you in.
Yes, thanks. Nice to be here. I was interested, by the way, driving in to hear Brown Sugar, because I think that's a bit of a controversial song these days, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, but I turned it on full volume and I was really grooving to it. It was
that's
it
the
was
thing,
wonderful.
isn't it?
Yes.
I did look. One of my producers alerted me to the lyrics, and I thought, and then I thought, look, let's just play it for what it is.
Yes, it is a wonderful.
And it's a quiz,
song.
you know. But probably not a song that you will hear a lot more after 2021.
No.
Nice to have you in, and
Thank you.
one of the things I like about you, Mary, is you're not afraid to change your mind if presented with the evidence.
Yes, well, because I haven't got any, skin in the game, I can just change my mind, and I don't lose anything by doing it.
Well, you've got an ego like all of us.
Well, yeah. But indeed. But this week, or since I was last in here talking about reverse mortgages, I had a bit of not an epiphany is too strong a word, but a guy from Heartland Bank wrote to me and said, Mary, you're being a little bit too limiting in recommending reverse mortgages only for people later in retirement. So just very quickly, reverse mortgages are when you get, typically in retirement, you borrow against the house. You've got a mortgage-free house, and then you borrow against the house and pay no interest or no principal repayments. And so the loan builds up and builds up. And when you sell the house or die, it's paid back. And because the loans if you get one of those loans at 65 or 70 and then live for another 20 or 30 years, the compounding interest can mean the loan grows awfully fast. And I therefore say, and the interest rates are higher than they are on regular mortgages, and I therefore say, look, try not to when you're in early retirement. And I'm still saying that. But he wrote and said, look, there are a lot of people in early retirement who don't have other savings. They've used their savings up, or for whatever reason. Things happen to people. They start a business and then right at retirement time, the business collapses or whatever. Things happen. And he said they've been really, in fact, one of the things he said is I've seen many customers put off approaching us, and they are no longer in a position to enjoy the benefit of the equity they release because they've got older, and so they've missed out on being able to make good use of the money tied up in their house. So I thought, well, yeah, look, as long as it's not a huge amount of money, and as long as people understand what they're doing here, it's not such a bad thing to do for people in earlier retirement. And while I was thinking, and I'll go into that in a bit more in a minute, but I also thought there are a lot of other ways people can make their money go further in retirement or make their finances work better. So I'll get onto those in a minute too. But on the reverse mortgages, the Heartland and SBS are the only two banks, to my knowledge, offering them at the moment. And at Heartland, he says the average borrower is 73, which is younger than I would really recommend. He said most of them don't have any savings, or they've used up their savings, and about 40% of them are getting them as a form of debt consolidation. So they've perhaps got credit card debt and other high interest debt. And so reverse mortgages, while their rates are higher, I think they're about 6 at the moment, higher than an ordinary mortgage, but they're still a lot lower than a credit card.
You'd approve of debt consolidation, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, certainly.
You'd mostly approve of not getting into debt in the first place, but sometimes you can't avoid it.
That's right. And certainly if you can consolidate the debt into one loan at a lower interest rate, that obviously makes a lot of sense for people. And another third of the people who are getting them here are using them for day-to-day expenses, he said. So usually it's a small amount. At first, it's usually about 8% of the value of the house. So they're not borrowing, So they've got a house worth, these days, it could well be worth $1 million or $750,000 or something like that. And if they're borrowing only a fairly small percentage of it, then it's not necessarily a bad idea. He says we tell them to only borrow what they need. They can get it as a line of credit, so they can just add to the loan as they need it, or they can get regular payments if they want that to supplement their super. He says we have controls to ensure customers don't blow it all on a big party. And he said that even though the younger retirees getting them, the average term of a reverse mortgage is 7 years, and so most of them after within a few years are either moving to a smaller house or going to a retirement village or moving in with family. Only 25% of the repayments come when the customer dies or moves into aged care. So that's surprised me. So only a quarter of them are sort of long term. Although I thought, Heartland's been doing this, I don't know, it's between, say, 5 and 10 years now. They haven't been doing them terribly long, and I think, so they haven't had time yet for
Not a lot of data.
Yeah, and for people to have those longer-term loans. But still...
Right, yeah.
He also says we get every applicant to consider alternative options such as downsizing, and we encourage them to discuss it with their families and they have to get independent legal advice. So in short, I'm still saying I'd rather people wait until later in retirement. But if you're really short of money and you've got a house and it's sitting there worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars, it is a way to do it. Just do it with your eyes open and know that it will grow quite fast.
Yeah, and I guess from what he's saying, do it with some confidence that it's in the bank's interests, or at least the bank appears to be not wanting to let you get into trouble.
Yeah.
They're not going to push and push and push, and they don't want you to end up with spiralling debt for
Partly
decades.
because, there's nothing like an old person going to the media saying, I was duped by this bank. I mean, I'm not saying the banks haven't got people's best interests at heart, but it would also be terrible publicity for them. Because old people in particular, if they get scammed or in some way cheated, that always comes, looks worse. Worse, yeah.
I think we've settled on older people.
Older, well, yes. Well,
because no matter what age we're talking about, I'll get a text from someone saying, "Oh, I'm that age and I'm not old."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's quite true. And then I came up with, went back to my book, Rich Enough, actually, and looked at all the other ways you can make finances easier in retirement. Because some of these you do have to own a home, but not all of them.
That's a great list. You've got 10 tips.
Yes, and so the first one is to just retire later, which is becoming much more common. So not retiring at, say, 65. And people report that they get a lot of job satisfaction out of continuing to work. They get social contact. They don't necessarily continue to work full-time, but perhaps part-time. Now, I know that there are going to be people out there saying, well, that's all very well for you to say, but I've lost my job and I can't get another job. There is definitely ageism out there for getting jobs. But I've heard of people doing consulting, doing tutoring. Think about what your skills are and do some tutoring in that. Teaching your hobby. I've probably mentioned this before. I know a woman who's very good at decorating birthday cakes, etc. And so she does that and charges quite a lot of money for a beautiful cake.
You spent your whole life getting good at something.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of... I know a man who was formerly a chief executive of quite a big company who's now mowing lawns, and he loves it. He gets to know all the regulars, goes around and mows their lawns, gets to know the neighbourhood gossip. So, there are things people can do to earn a bit of extra money, and it makes an amazing difference. If you continue work, say until... Well, in one example I worked through, this was a woman had an X amount of dollars. I can't remember, but that doesn't matter. They translated if she retired at 65, she'd have $610 a week to spend out of that money. But at 67, it will be $730, and at 70, it would be $970. So you compare that. At 65, she'd have $610. At 70, she'd have $970 a week to spend. That's the difference it can make, having few more years when you're actually saving instead of spending. So that's a really important way for people to just think of some way you can earn a bit of money. Moving house is an obvious one, and maybe moving to another town. Some words of caution on that. I've had people writing to my column and saying when you move to smaller towns, the medical care isn't always as good, especially if you need specialist care, and people might not be as friendly. So I recommend people actually rent out their own house and go and rent a house in the place they're thinking of moving to and see how that works for them. Do that for maybe a year and see if it works well. But even within your own town, you can sometimes move to a smaller place. There are all sorts of options around there. Some other slightly more creative ones, taking boarders or flatmates or Airbnb. A lot of people say, I do not want my privacy invaded by having other people in my house, especially in my old age. But I, for example, know one woman who did it for a while and loved it because she had foreign students coming in. Now, there aren't that many of them at the moment, but they'll come back. And they taught her how to cook their ethnic cooking, and she taught them how to cook New Zealand cooking, and they had wonderful meals and a lot of laughs over the dinner table. And that's the kind of thing that can work really well. Check the tax ramifications of it and check your insurance if you're going to be taking people in, because sometimes the insurance company won't cover you unless you tell them. But that can be a really neat thing for people to do in retirement. The fourth one is subdividing.
You could just take someone, if you're near a tertiary institution, take somebody for the university year, maybe. That's see right. How you like it, and then at the end of the year you're not committed long term.
That's a really good suggestion. And even if you do like it, you get the summers off, perhaps, know. And look, there are ways that people can take somebody on, and get a lot of fun out of it, actually. Get security, get social contact, get all sorts of stuff, all sorts of good stuff can flow from that. Subdividing your land, don't think you can't do it because you tried to do it 20 years ago and you weren't allowed, because the cities around the country, especially Auckland and I'm sure some others, have made it easier to subdivide because they want more dense housing now. And quite a lot of older people might quite welcome having less garden to take care of. Now, rates rebates and rates postponement are really good ways to get some extra money that a lot of people aren't realising.
Yeah, I love this tip of yours.
Yeah, so rate rebates, or sometimes they're called rate remission, that's for people on low incomes who can actually get a break from paying their rates, to just don't have to pay them, or more likely get a reduction in their rates. Actually, the government's got some kind of scheme in where you get up to $655 a year taken off your rates. So that's freeing up some money year by year, which could really help people. And then rates postponement, which is hardly ever used. Apparently there's only a few people around the place that do it. But it's like a mini reverse mortgage, in that you just don't pay your rates until you sell the house or die. And the debt grows in the meantime, and interest grows on it, but it tends to be a smaller amount than if you got a reverse mortgage. And the interest rate will be lower, because the city councils charge you the rate of interest that they pay on their debt, which tends to be 3-4, that sort of thing, that sort of percentage.
Or less.
Yes, it could be less in some cases. And I really think people should be doing this more, because it frees up a few $1,000s a year to fix up the house or go on a little trip somewhere. Now, what have I got down here? Loan, yes. The loan does grow, but don't forget that your house value grows as well. Yeah. With both the rates postponement and the reverse mortgages. When people look at tables about how much their debt will grow, they think, oh my goodness, after 20 years it's doubled or tripled or quadrupled. But the value of the house should have gone up by that much as well. Yeah. Houses don't always go up, but over the long term they do. So, yeah. And with rates postponement, you can pay it back usually if if you then suddenly got an inheritance or something like that, most councils will then accept that you pay it back. I was just having a look online at who offers it. Now, some places offer postponement only to lower income people, and the ones that I saw, I think this is true. When I went to look, Jessie, I went on all these city council websites, and honestly, a lot of them are nightmares of communication. They're terrible.
Yeah.
But I think it's true that you can only get it in hardship in Christchurch, Palmerston North, Rangitikei, Whanganui. But ones that offer it to everybody include Auckland, Thames Coromandel, Western Bay of Plenty, Nelson and Marlborough. And look, there will be others. It was just really hard. I ran out of time, actually, to check them all.
So check with your own council.
Yes, and don't forget this could change. I mean, I think it's an idea that will probably take on a bit more, especially with house values going up the way they have around the country. And so if your council doesn't offer it or only offers it to poorer people, check again in 5 or 10 years and, ring them up and ask them and push your council members to bring it in, because it's no skin off anyone's nose, because the council's just basically lending you the money at the interest rate it has to pay to borrow money, and getting it back later on. It's not like other ratepayers are suffering from it. It's just a loan to you.
Why wouldn't everyone do it?
I don't know, and I don't know why every council doesn't offer it to everybody. I could possibly get onto a bit of a campaign to try and make this happen a bit more, because it's a really good idea, and especially with house values growing the way they have. We are running short of time here, aren't we? So I've got
you can go right up to 25 too.
Can I? Okay, yeah, but still that's 4 more with a minute each, I think.
Okay.
Accommodation supplements. That's from the government, from Work and Income. They'll help you with rent, board or home ownership costs. So regardless of whether you own your own home or are renting, you can get extra money over and above New Zealand Super. And, that quite a few people, possibly especially old people, sometimes are too proud to take handouts from the government, although we don't think that way about New Zealand Super, but taking other money from the government. But you're entitled to that. Things happen in people's lives that they can't always help. And I would strongly encourage people who are really struggling in retirement to look into those accommodation supplements from Work and Income. You could call them up or email them and just ask what might be available for you.
So you think that someone who was on New Zealand Super might still be eligible for accommodation?
Yes. New Zealand Super's for everybody over 65.
Yeah.
And you can get accommodation supplements as well as that, which not everyone realises, and the money is there. Another quite sort of radical one, number 8, is sell your house and become a tenant. But there are people out there. I had someone in my column a while back, my Herald column, saying they were thinking of doing that, and there is no real reason why people shouldn't do that, as long as they free up enough money to cover their rent for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. And
they want to probably try and get a long-term lease from a landlord and choose a landlord who's likely to treat you well.
Yeah.
But it can, free up a heck of a lot of money. It's another one that's come out of the fact that house values are so high.
Yeah. So if say you were paying $300 a week, what's that? $15,000 a year over 20 years is $300,000. So you're going to spend $300,000 on rent, and you're going to sell your home for $1 million.
Yeah.
You might just decide, great, I'll take that $700,000 and not worry about it.
Yeah. Look, it really can work for people, and quite a lot of people, even if they don't have a mortgage anymore, they by the time they look at what they're paying in terms of rates and maintenance and insurance, etc., the rent might not be that different from what they're paying in house costs. So look, it's just something to think about, a radical one. But the last couple are to sell assets on Trade Me, or to sell them in any way to anybody. But Trade Me can be quite fun. Mm-hmm. People marketing that, if you look on Trade Me and see how people are marketing the type of thing you might sell, it might be, I don't know, a piece of art or a really beautiful bedspread, or who knows
woolen
what.
beanies.
Yeah, look, anything. And if you photograph it well and have a little go at marketing it well, people can make hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars really if they get in and sell stuff. Consider even selling valuables, family jewellery and that. If you're really struggling to have a nice life, you might want to, not necessarily keep all the jewellery or whatever else, medals, whatever else you've got. Just think about that. It's not... Lots of people would say you can't do that. But if you are buying only cheap food and not really being able to afford the movies, say, well, maybe you should do that. It's just and getting rid of clutter is a huge plus from the point of view of whoever's going to clean up your house after you die. So that can be another advantage for it all. Now, my final one is, I know I've mentioned this to you before, but people might not remember it or might not have heard it. And that is, early in retirement, you add to your will that you're going to give some money to a charity. And, it might be $5,000, it might be $500,000, who knows what it will be, but you put it in your will. And then if you live to, say, 85 or 90, you become the charity. You take it out of your will and spend it on yourself at that point. And it's, a nice, tidy way to take care of the fact that people worry about living a really long life and then not being able to finance it. So you spend your own savings up until age 85 or 90, and then you dip into the money you had planned to give to charity.
Love it. That might be a controversial one, but I'm afraid we don't have any time for controversy because that's the end of our session. Can you suggest a book where all these tips might be collected in one place?
Jessie, you're a gem. It is written up in my book, Rich Enough.
Great.
Yes.
It's Mary Holm, personal finance expert.
Hey podcaster, meet Acast. We're the top independent podcast network for creators in the know. We empower you to develop your podcast idea, find your audience, and grow listener relationships wherever those listeners are. You'll also find a whole range of ways to make money, from membership plans for paying fans to our fully curated and creative advertising experience. Visit acast.com/network to find out more. Acast, for the stories.